encouraging, chair hugging moment. But before I even get into that, I have to say that this platform, we are truly fortunate to be blessed with such a wide array of very stellar speakers who have such broad spectrum of experience, and they are so willing most of the time to, last minute sometimes to lend their voices towards helping us here to be better parents of our children, and the next generation as well. And today definitely is no exception. We have a very, very experienced parent coach and educator to help us all tackle the topic of sex education with our children. Without further ado, I would hand over to Miss Irene. Is it Mrs.? Mm, Which is it? I'll leave
Mrs.
that for you to clarify. Irene Bangwell, over to you. Please give us a brief introduction of yourself. I've read a bit about you, but um, do us the honor of giving us more information about who you are, your experiences, and so on.
Thank you so much, Miss Fees. I was looking forward to meeting I like the way your name was tagged earlier on when Jide posted. So good evening, everyone. I just like the idea of the Miss Fees. Good evening, everyone. My name is Irene Bangwell. Um, Simply put, I'm an educator. My husband and I run the NOSC 100 Naira a day school in Kuje in Abuja for children from low-income families. It's a secondary school where children pay 100 Naira fees per day, and they get books, uniform, lunch. They get STEM-based education, and the girls get monthly sanitary pads. So that's my day job. But I happen to also have a second day job, all right? And in my second day job, I teach body safety to girls. So I'm a girls coach. I support parents raising girls. I have two daughters, and I'm also the creator of an amazing tool called the Body Smart Girl Bundle, where we have sex education pieced in age by age grouping. So that means we've designed sex education in such a way that the fear parents usually have, that fear of not saying what you're not supposed to say, we've kind of have handled it by ensuring that children are learning exactly what they need to learn per age, and they're going to the extent, the right limit as set for sex education. I also, in the bundle, have written a book for parents called How to Talk with Your Girls About Sex. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And using the resources and knowledge in the bundle, I host a holiday boot camp every holiday called the Body Smart Girl Boot Camp. And so it's such an honor to be here. In summary, I'm an educator. I run a charity school. As a parenting coach, I support families raising girls by designing body safety resources for both parents and their daughters. It's an honor to be here today.
Wow. I don't even know where to start. There's like so many places to, first of all, where do I put my teeth in first? Should I go with charity school? How does she manage that? How does she manage run the world? On top of
Right?
that, she's also doing various other initiatives to help the girl child and on so many levels, and also parents that have girls as well. I should have
Yeah.
known you like I don't know, 10 years ago, because I also have two daughters as well. Would have been
Wow.
nice. Yeah, I have two daughters as well. All right,
Yeah,
let's not make this our personal business. We'll catch up later.
definitely.
And, I will talk about we will go back to your book, which I know would be an awesome tool for parents. I will give you the opportunity to shed more light to that, how we can have access to it, and the bundles that you have as well. But first things first, as parents, we all have children of various ages. Some of us are a little anxious about the big discussion. Some of us we just go jump straight in. But what do you think is the best way to start this conversation? Should there be a particular tone? Should it be in a particular environment? And at what age as well should we talk about sex with our children?
So I think that one of the reasons why parents struggle with the whole idea is because there's actually a misconception about what sex education is. So when we say, so when do we talk about sex? It sounds like, so when do we talk about intercourse? And thing is,
Mm,
sex education is not intercourse education. It's a totally different thing entirely. So sex education is, I mean, the first time each and every one of us saw the word sex, it must have been on a phone, male or female. So the whole idea is specialized education for specific gender. So I'm raising a boy. What are the things my boy needs to know about being a boy? Body changes, cultural limitations, um, mindsets, things that are synonymous with boys of different ages, challenges that he could face. How do I equip him to navigate in the gender that God has designed them to be in? Same thing with girls. So sex education is not intercourse education. And when we look at it from this point of view that, oh, it's just about preparing every human being on how to live in the gender that they were born in. So we're looking at what are the risks boys are exposed to at this age. What are the risks girls are exposed to in this way? Now, because what differentiates a boy from a girl is basically genitalia. That's where the whole sexual thing comes in. So, what would someone do to try to exploit them sexually, touching their private body part, trying to molest them? That's just what encapsulates it. And so there's a sentence I want people to go away with when we're talking about sex education. And that sentence is that sex education is teaching children decision making. Sex education is teaching children decision making about their bodies, about situations they will find themselves in, and about the opposite sex. I take it again. Sex education is decision making, teaching children decision making about their bodies, different situations, and then the opposite sex. Now, if you're a parent that looks at it from that point of view, then you would know that there's sex education for a 3-year-old, there's sex education for a 7-year-old, there's sex education for a 9-year-old. Let me give you a typical example. Sex education about their bodies, decision making about their bodies, for instance. For a 3-year-old, is about other people not touching them. For a 9-year-old, puberty has kicked in. The reality is different. So you see, with sex education, there is sex education for a child at different levels. Even for 1 to 2-year-olds, there is no. Auntie should not wipe you too many times. There is that. Do you get the idea? And so, what should the tone be now when you are relaxed in understanding what you're trying to do? It takes away that fear of, I'm going to say something wrong, which eventually makes you suspicious of your child in the process of having a conversation, which can throw a lot away. So, having put this foundation in place, what's the best way to start with sex education? Is talking about yourself, is asking your child questions, is creating an environment where the child can initiate. Maybe a child asks a question and then you take it on from there and you build on it. But the most important thing I want you to know is that sex education is not preaching, it is gistic, it's conversation. Because if it is preaching, you're the only one talking. And sex education begins when a child starts to tell you, what if my friend said, I found this, that kind of thing. So if there's anything parents need to take away is that it's not a formal conversation. It's gist. We talk, they share, I share. I tend to understand the perspective or some of the things they've been exposed to. And then I think through how to bring them back from wherever they may have veered off to, and I start bringing them back on course. Over to
Wow,
you.
wow. You know what? This you just like a light bulb just went up in my head as you said that word. Um, sex education is not intercourse, which I think we sort of tend to, merge together when we're thinking about it. And then the another thing I liked that you said is the delivery of the conversation being it should be more of a two-way thing, which is where you mentioned it should be gisted, not that you're preaching. You shall not touch this part. You are
No,
not allowed to let anybody do this. So I like that, and that's true. It just makes it more of a natural process when it's more of a just in a conversational process. So parents guardians put that in mind. Sex education is fundamentally teaching our children decision making about their body. Um, next, I'm now going further with our next questions. Now, the dynamics of each household is different.
Yes.
Um, some households are single parent households. Some households, um, one parent is quite busy and the other one isn't. Some household they have all boys. Some household is girls like us, and then some
Mm.
household is a mix. Who do you think, on whose shoulder does that responsibility of initiating the conversation on sex falls on?
So I like this question. You see, so before I give you my perspective, I was raised by a single mom. So
Go she lady, go she woman.
so I was raised by a single mom. My mom had me when she was 19. She was an athlete, she was on state scholarship, a lot of promise about her future. And
Mm,
this girl pops in, right? And so by the
yeah.
time my mom gives birth to me, her life takes a totally different course entirely, which is part
Yeah.
of the motivation for what I do. And so my mom's story is enough sex education for me. But having said that, I realize that it still takes two people to adequately provide sex education. I'm going to tell you why mothers and fathers have a responsibility. Who has what kind of responsibility? I don't want to say more, but what kind? Sorry, sorry, I'm just dealing with a little bit of a cold. So I realized very early on that there's an age when children have the excitement to learn about their bodies. They listen to mommy a lot. That's the younger ages. It's okay when if mommy does all the talking in that phase, or if mommy does most of the talking in that phase, they're hanging out most of the time with mommy in many homes. So it's okay, it's fantastic when mom is doing all the talking. But when puberty kicks in, one of the teenage responses to mommies is that mommies exaggerate. So there's a tendency for them to think like, ah, drama queen, she's blowing this thing out of proportion. So it means that when children start getting into teen years, there needs to be male figures, fathers, excuse me, coming in to talk. Let me give you a typical scenario. My husband and I had to sit down and decide what we wanted for our children when it came to sex education. And one of it was that the girls need to be able to walk into the house and tell us about anything sexual they were exposed to or they were dealing with. So imagine one of those days my daughter comes home from school, she's around 9, and just walks in saying, Mom, Daddy, there's a boy in my class that I really like. I think we're going to get married. In my head, I'm like, baby, do we spill this thing on this girl that is 1 week something? And so my husband looks at her and says, Tell me about him. What are the things you like about him? Tell me about. And she goes, that he never tells lies. He doesn't lie. And she said that because that was a core family value we have. But the thing is, it meant that she could talk to daddy, and that gives daddy a window to share his perspective. It means that daddy can come and say, maybe we're eating one of those days in the house, and daddy starts to say, when you talk about not going online to Google sex education, remember, listen to what mommy said. If you have any question, ask me, ask mommy, you know, that kind of thing. So fathers can give a pillar, a structure, so that it validates that mommy is not a drama queen. So in my mother's case, it was her older brother. Interestingly, my grandparents did a lot to ensure that my mom had a semblance of going back to life as it should be, even though I later realized that going back to life is in the mind many times. So my mom had to go back to school, walked out of town. And so I lived with my grandparents and her brothers. So it's her brother that brought me my pad, it's her brother. So because there was a man telling me there's a way men think, oh, there's a way, giving me that perspective. Now I'm looking at it in the context of girls now. When a father talks to a daughter in those, they've entered puberty where they feel like that boy in class is going to marry them, and daddy comes to say, boys, this is how boys really are. When I was a boy, I did this. He puts everything in a frame, compared to when mommy is talking. He puts
Yeah.
he put he puts things in a box. They say, look, what this boy is saying is about how he's feeling and is momentary. But you've taken it to 20 years from now. You're seeing yourself with him and children. And so it still takes two. But even if there is no father in the picture, like in my mom's case, it was her brother, bringing in that person who periodically comes to give him to say, look, your mom is serious about this thing. Just listen to your mom and everything. Mothers are the ones that fill in the minute details. But we kind of still need the structure that fathers bring to the conversation, saying, look, this thing is this important. And then after a while, when the girls get older, into 15 to 17, when they're feeling like they're getting ready to date, that's a daddy's time completely. Taking them out on a date, teaching them about, how do you know a guy honors you when you're on a date with him? Now, only fathers can teach that. And I don't know if you guys follow Steve Harvey. A few years ago,
Yeah,
I saw a video where one of his sons said they woke up one day and realized that Steve Harvey had a call to be a father to many more people than he'd given birth to. And when you look into his audience, you would always see more women than men. Because regardless of what mothers tell daughters, there's still a role that fathers play to reinforce her self-worth because she's looking at the gender she's attracted to. And so when he gives her instructions and guide on what to do, it has a place. So when I look into Steve Harvey's audience and watch all the videos, I'm like, this man became a father for a generation. And so we still need fathers playing that role. There's a phase where they are putting in the pillars, then there's a second where they are holding the entire baton. By this time, the girl is out of secondary school or preparing to wrap up. She's having questions. How would I know? What do I do when the guy is cheating? Girls are not good for that kind of talk. Girls say, don't worry, just keep being right. He's going to choose. But father say, if he's cheating, he doesn't care about you. You get the point? It's two different responses that they need per phase. So all through the course of our lives, there would always be a role for mothers and fathers.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is very insightful information because I'm thinking back about when I had the conversation with my own children. I was the only one that had the conversation with my own children, even though yeah. So, but I was very practical about the conversation with them. But I see that very key point that you said, where there should be the male voice as well, and as the children are growing, because at the younger phase, it's fine when it's just the mom, but once they get into that puberty stage, it's so important there is the male view and for the children to have as well. So it's never too late to correct that. I'm hoping so.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely,
but
my
that brings
sister. Yeah.
yeah, that bringing us to the next question about things that we should not do or should not say when we're having the education with our children. Now, the focus is the sex education. We know that
Yeah.
it's different from intercourse, but what are the things that we shouldn't be saying? I know one of the key things is we shouldn't go about it preaching, like you said earlier on. But what are those things, the red flags we shouldn't be saying, or the right things that we should actually say?
Thank you so very much, ma'am, for this question. So we're looking at intercourse now. We want to talk about intercourse because that's a necessary part of sex education. But there's one thing we must never do. We must never say anything too soon. Let me give you an
Mhm.
example. 6 to 8 year olds are not supposed to know about intercourse as sex. They're not. And I'm going to give you a reason why. When you have kids, once they turn 6 to 8 year olds, they're in the frame where they're making sense of things. As things come to their mind, it falls out of their mouth. So if you notice when they turn 6, they want to understand relationships. So they want to understand things like so if your husband was calling you, instead of saying that Bobby, dad is calling you, don't say, Bobby, your husband is calling you. They're trying to make sense of relationships and they are very experimental. We don't have enough support system for that age group in a typical Nigerian school.
Yeah.
It is a 6 to 8 year old that will open the dress of another child just to see what their private part looks like, to touch it. So that is not the age to now tell them intercourse as this and that, because they're going to head into school and call someone and say, my mommy said that there's a way the penis can enter the vagina. Let us try it and see how it will be. By this time, nobody knows it was out of curiosity. Is that they're from a failed background, their parents are not doing the right thing, the labeling has begun. So when kids are 6 to 8 years old, that is the time where we strengthen who they ask questions, because they start to have a whole lot of questions. That is the age that if you tell them about intercourse, they don't know how to regulate. They will get straight on Google and Google it. And I wish I was talking from someone else's perspective. I'm not. So I've done the experiment. My first daughter is 11 now. She got to know about sex before she was 9. You don't want to know what I've done to mend that thing I did. Then my
Please
second,
share.
then my second got to know about sex in September when she turned 9, on her 9th birthday. Response is different. My daughter went and Googled penis inside vagina. I don't know how to explain this. She Googled penis inside vagina. And by the time we were done, she had gotten access to 17 videos on YouTube, including a video where there was a TikTok challenge where girls were inserting ice cubes in their vagina.
Wow.
So at that age, they don't know how to. And one of the things I learned was that the very idea of telling your 6 to 8 year old, because they're going to stumble on this information, by the way, they'll hear things and they come to you and you say, I promise you, I'm going to tell you this on your 9th birthday, but we're going to talk about other things except this. It's part of teaching our children that there's time for everything. And it goes a long way. My second child came home one day and said they had a swimming activity in school. And one of her classmates said her swimming trunk was sexy. And so I asked her, I said, baby, she now asked, mommy, does sex have another meaning? Apparently, I had told her that sex is gender. So she's wondering how can a swimming trunk be sexy? She said, does sex have another meaning? I said, yes, baby, it does. But that definition of sex is for when you turn 9. So because we talk a lot and we have a value system that makes them know that there is no need to go looking for something that mom is going to give you at the right time. I mean, you need to have a relationship to do what I did. So you get the point I'm making. So one of the things you do
Yeah.
is you don't spill too soon. But unfortunately, if you run a home where you don't use parental guidance to watch shows, everything Irene said is throw it in the toilet and go. If your kids are watching just any reel on social media, they're watching anything on social media, they're watching anything on TV, they watched Bridgerton, they watch everything and say we are closing their eyes. I'm telling you that you already have a sexualized child, and every curriculum I have is scattered for that kind of child.
Mm. Mm.
Unfortunately, when 6 to 8 year olds get to know about sex too early, it takes up head space for learning. It preoccupies them. They're constantly imagining things. They're sitting inside the classroom, but they're in the wonder world of what? Penis, vagina, something came out. The lady was screaming like that. You have no idea how much it interferes with their normal existence. So my recommendation is that children less than 6 to 8 year olds should not know what intercourse is, but they should know that there's a cell in a man and a cell in a woman. That after they get married, when they come together, that cell will become a child. That there's a process to it becoming a child. So that's what I taught my child, that there's a process for it to become a child. But I didn't talk about it in the genitalia context. And on
Right.
her 9th birthday, I called her, I said, baby girl, let me tell you that process. First and foremost, she went, what? What is penis doing inside vagina? I said, I mean, the same thing I've been wondering. How God designed this thing, I don't even know. I told her, we have to form as if we're also innocent, like we don't even know. I told her. And she says, wow. So then that one my classmate said was wrong. I said, what did your classmate say? So our classmate said that is when a man puts his hand in a woman's private part. I said, but you know, I've always told you, mom is always the one that has the right information. So don't ask, don't listen to friends. Just come home. Mom will tell you everything. But when they get to 9 years old, it's the whole 9 yards. Your body's changing, and your body's changing because you're transiting into adult's body. But this transition does not mean that your body is ready to do everything that adults can do. And because of the way that I am, when my first daughter say, what do I mean by you can't do everything an adult body can? I said, that's why we have VVF. The girl is developed, she's seeing her period, she has a womb, she's ready to have a child. But if she tries it, she'll have perforation because her body is not yet matured. It's like all the parts are forming to, they are there, but they are not fully matured. You know, by the time they're 9 to 11, I'm telling them that the body will change. You feel like this, you feel this type of way and everything, but there are other consequences. Now, if I have a 9 to 11-year-old and I've not yet told her about sex or him about sex, are you kidding me that they don't know? Let me tell you, everything I'm saying is about helping children know what the right thing they've heard is. In the sea of different things they've heard, you're just creating a standard that this is the right one. No. So I find disturbing when a parent sends a child to a boot camp at 9 to 11 and tells me that the way we explain sex being penis in vagina was explicit. I'm like, you're kidding me. What is sex? Is it not penis in vagina? What else will I say about that scenario? But there's a rule of thumb when I'm talking about sex to 9 to 11-year-olds, for 12 to 14-year-olds, to 15 to 17-year-olds, I never talk about orgasms. You know why? Now, I'm a children's minister. As we equip children, we need to know that Satan has the capacity to take a good message and flip it in its head. You talk about something and a child picks a terminology, Googles it, and is ready to go bonkers with it. So even in talking about the release of sperm, even when I talk about sex, I talk about it in a very biological sense that children don't necessarily draw. But I have enough relationship for my children to say, my classmate said it's very pleasurable. I say, yeah, it is. It's just that it's short-term pleasure. I know how to demystify what wants to be blown out of proportion. Because sitting down here and having this session today, the truth of the matter is that sex has, as a concept, has been blown out of proportion. There are probably teenagers out there who think that people can have sex for 1 hour. And that's because the wrong people are the ones feeding them information. And if it was their parents, it would be straight up. A few months back, about a year or two ago, I went to one church to minister, and a woman came and told me she's having issues. Her 6-year-old or 7-year-old boy, a neighbor went and told that boy that penis is like pencil, while woman's vagina is like palm kernel. And this boy has been on a wild goose chase for months, trying to look at how a woman's vagina is. He's opening skirting school, begging girls. He's not doing his homework. He's overwhelmed by it. The mother called me. I said, what? You just needed to tell him that vagina is like lips in another direction. Oto is finished. So if kids were coming back to ask parents and hearing from parents, it will close the door to other, very inciting information they're hearing, triggering information they're hearing. So what should we not say? Don't bring in pleasure inside this thing. Just talk about it biologically. Let me tell you another way I talk about sex that is crazy. When I want to talk to, especially 9-year-olds, 9, not 11, 9-year-olds, I'll tell them that, in fact, even 6-year-olds, I used to start by telling them that United Nations says that there are 385,000 babies born daily. That if God was making human beings every day, that he may not have time to hear our prayers. So he designed a system where he put a cell in a man, he put another cell in a woman, and when they get married and come together, that there's a process that those cells meet and it becomes a baby and starts to grow in the mother's womb. Now, when they're 9 years old, I tell them that God really wanted a way that children could be born so he doesn't have to recreate. And so that children are born through different ways. And I start with IVF, sorry. I tell them that they take his sperm. I'm trying to make sure that we are not living in the genitals. I tell them if they take his sperm from a man, and doctors can insert it into a woman's, you know, body and to the egg, and it fertilizes it and it becomes a baby. And that's for many families where they may be struggling to have a baby through the normal conception. I started and I said, well, but the normal one would be that the man will put his penis, I don't talk about erection, will put his penis in the woman's vagina, and the sperm, I make it look as if it's transport system, carries the sperm, puts it inside, and the baby starts to fertilize. When I talk about it biologically like that, it takes away the excitement. So normally I tell people that sex education taught well, children don't giggle. If you teach it how it should be, there's no reason for children to giggle. Because I remember the first time when I told my first daughter that, see what happened. Do you know, one day she called me. One of the things I try to do is to say, be the first person to teach your kids about intercourse before they teach it. It's in the primary 5 curriculum. They teach it around first term. So that long vacation before they enter primary 5, if you're doing the right age in the right class, that should be the age they're around 9 or so. You tell them. My daughter came home one day and asked me, say, Mommy, you and daddy have had sex twice, right? So that you can have me and Elena. And I didn't know when I just told her, I said, baby, you have no idea. She looked at me one day and said, this is gross. I could never see daddy doing something like that. I said, to, it's how God designed it to. I said it in such a sober mood that you would think that this was excruciating. So I don't know if I've been able to help in any way, but there's a right age and there's a method to say it when it gets to the age to say. So Miss Fee, is over to you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for shedding so much light into the best routes and best way to do that, and dropping so many nuggets and bringing your own experiences as well. Similar to mine, just like you rightly said, the sex education, or more like changes in the body, is taught in the British curriculum in year 5. So that was when I had my own conversation with my kids, because I was in the school my kids attended, and I knew when they were going to have the topic. So I said to myself, no, before the school does the conversation, I shall be having the conversation with my daughter. So I decided
Absolutely.
to have the conversation with both my girls. My older one was 10 and my younger one was 9. So I had the conversation, was very clinical about it,
Yes.
name the body parts the way they were.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
when the discussion was had in school, she said they were like, Mommy, people were like just cringing and all that, because they go to a British school, and
Yeah.
and it was more in details about the process. But they were
Yes.
like, to them it was not a big deal, because I'd made it seem like it's the natural course of life,
Yes. Yes.
which was
Absolutely.
nice,
Yes.
as well. So, but moving on beyond um, the generation and the times we are in, although there's really nothing new under the sun, what is happening now
Absolutely.
are things that happened generations and centuries before now. But there's a lot of changes in the society that our children are growing up in, with
Yeah.
regards to LGBTQ, with regards to fluid gender, and all that, including things like dating and pornography. How do we as parents, especially being Nigerians, where whether we like it or not, we are a religious nation. It's either we are
Yeah.
Muslims and we want our children to uphold those values, or we are Christians and we want our children to follow the biblical doctrines with regards to um, sex and how God created um, man and woman from the very beginning. So, what tools or what suggestions can you give us to help support our children in these very confusing times?
Auntie Fisayo, I had to call your neighbor because this is where we're talking the real hard stuff. So this is the generation that you cannot be a hypocrite with. Let
Yeah.
me explain what I mean. It cannot be only when it is time to talk about homosexuality you remember that you're a Christian. It won't work for this generation. It can't be when it's time to talk about homosexuality. That's when you remember what the Quran says. We have to live from the principles that we live by. Our children need to see the fruits of the pathways we have taken so that when they decide that they're going with what the Bible is saying, they're not taking it only when it's homosexuality. Because the arguments out in the world are compelling. So let me give you an example. Look at this. A few years ago, a movie came out and a series came out called Empire. I mean, it was a collection of very intelligent people. But it didn't take long for me to see that there were other agendas around Empire. The simple thing was that the gay rights movement presented to a generation that gay people were normal people. They were talented, they were gifted, and they should not be discriminated. Now, they've done a number of things, including driving empathy in the heart of the next generation. So I just want you to know that if you're raising a child today, many of our children may not be pro homosexuality, but that they are empathic towards it. They feel the pain. They feel like, oh, I mean, this person is just a normal human being. Should they be discriminated against? Which is why just isolating it to talk is not enough. So now we have to live from the values we're trying to teach our children. So, for example, in my home, my children know that we're Christians and the Bible forms the framework for all of our living. So, when I tell my children that, look, in this world, there are many worldviews, there's a Christian worldview, and then there's the scientific worldview. For example, there's a scientific worldview where this is it, this is what it looks like. I've also started teaching my children about humanistic thinking, where people come up with a phase of humanity, excuse me, which is attractive, which pulls you in, but the heart behind it violates God's intent. And so, because I'm a Christian in everything, it's easy for me to take, you know why we're honest? We tell the truth. God expects us to speak the truth. God honors us when we speak the truth. God makes people trust us when we speak the truth. Children now imbibe that in God there is a way. But also, I'm not raising my children naive to think that everybody follows God. I'm also teaching them that everybody does not follow God, and God does not kill everybody that doesn't follow Him. But in this world, God is demanding of us to live in this world, operate in this world, do business in this world without conforming to what we see. That's the first part. The second part is I've also sat down with my children to say, let's also examine the mindset of where homosexuality, some of the cases come from. I say some of them come from abuse. A boy was abused by another man, and that where there's abuse and there wasn't adequate care or the right kind of therapy or the right kind of support, especially prayerfully, that there can be demonic interference with a person's life that starts to make them long after something that they were exposed to through abuse. Ideally, something you were exposed to through abuse should not draw you, but because it is a demonic, I mean, for people that are Muslims, forgive me, I have to say it how I understand it biblically, right? There's a demonic interference with that person's life. And now, because of that demonic interference, people can struggle for such a long time. Try this, it didn't work. Try that, it didn't work. And so they start to think maybe I was born this way. But I also start to tell my children that, but we look across the nature and see that with other things that God created, this thing is not it's just something that humans think about. I also tell my children that sometimes I feel like there's a little bit too much data and science today. Take, for instance, I grew up in a home where my mom was the only daughter. And when she went out to go to school in other cities, I lived in that home with my uncles. My uncles got into puberty in that home, had girlfriends. I grew up, they used to call me cowboy as a child. And until today, I don't really have a feminine swag. As I told my children, if I was growing up in your time, somebody would say I was gay. But I'm 100% female, 100% feminine. But so I tell them, I said, some people are just sitting down and looking for little things that could have been negligible. And then they make it bigger. And people start to identify with that. Then I also tell them that the other challenge in the world today is that young people are searching for identity. And sometimes causes that causes like that give a sense of validation. I read about a young woman who went and had a double mastectomy, didn't have cancer because she wanted to identify with transgender men or whatever. I said, that's a cry for help. So I'm talking about LGBTQ, but also I'm not talking about it the way they would have told me when I was younger, when I said this is all demonic, everybody's going to hell. Man, I'm telling them where the science is coming from, the mindset supporting it, because I don't want my children going out in the world and going, wow, who knew? Wow, who knew? No, I want us to get all that information and talk about all the possible perspectives to it while showing you what the proactive, conviction based position needs to be. So, yeah, our children are living in different parts of the world in the middle of this. They're interacting with classmates and lecturers that have all kinds of views. I tell them, you can't shove your view down anybody's throat. However, I just want you to, as you empathize for these people, I want you to pray for them. I want you to never get to a point where you want to tweak scriptures to accommodate someone because they were kind to you. They're kind to you, you respond to them in kindness, but you never tweak your standing for what right is. Right is right, wrong is wrong. I pray for the people who are finding it difficult to know which is which. But the goal is that my children should get into the world, know what is out there in the world, but not be swept by it. I don't know if I've been able to answer your questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think my takeaway from what you said is that we as parents, we need to be grounded in our beliefs. And that shows, reflects, you don't now need to just take one aspect. It is the way you live your life that your children will believe what you actually stand for, and not
Yeah.
just taking up arms against a particular area with
Yeah.
regards to homosexuality and all that. And I think another thing that you said, which resonated with me, is that our children, they are, because I have two daughters, 17 and 18, they are very empathetic towards
Yes.
the challenges that same-sex, someone that is attracted to a girl or a boy faces. And
Yes.
they do look at it from that point of view that, you know what, that's only a part of which I do agree with them on.
Yeah.
I do agree. I say, yes, it's only a part of them. That's the person's sexual identity. I say,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, our belief is what the Bible says. And
Yes.
another thing that I must say is like rightly said, our children, this generation, they are looking for a sense of identity. Unlike those
Yeah.
of us that grew up in Nigeria, because if I'm thinking about my children and myself, more those of us that grew up in Nigeria, where we are rooted in our culture, the things,
Yes.
the way we are self-assured in being who
Yes.
we are. Unlike
Yes.
our children, that there's so much confusion out there that
Yes.
they're just looking for who they are, and that's what leads to experimentation and things like that. But the thing I believe from what you said that would anchor them is that relationship that you have with your children, so that
Yes.
they would always come back to you for suggestions, either you or dad, for
Yeah.
suggestions, ideas, or when it is that they are struggling with things. So it's very
Yeah.
important. Relationship building, moms and dads, it can be the key to your child going in one direction or the other when
Yes.
when they're doing self discovery. Oh, I'm so
Yes.
excited about this, and I'm even getting sad that the time is running away so fast. I wish we could have been here for so much longer. All right,
I
moving
had a
on to
good
the
time.
next. We have not finished though.
Okay. 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 It's okay, man.
I'm just saying that the time is going by so fast that there's so much to ask and so much to know. Okay, moving on to the next question, which one parent highlighted is if we begin the conversation of not just sex education, but the topic of intercourse, isn't that like
Yes.
encouraging our children to start doing it?
Okay, so not at all, ma'am, not at all. So let me explain. Our typical African mind is goes that way because the average parent today, nobody told you sex education, taught you. So you stumbled on it, and most of the time, you stumbled on it in a triggering way. So your first exposure lured you to do it. And so we kind of think that the pathway is know and do. No, it's about where you access it. I tell parents about the law of first mention. The first person that tells your child about sex determines the color that it takes. So if your child shares it with you as if another child shares it with your child as something fun that adults don't want us to experience, you're going to be fighting that mindset for a long time. But if you go first, you give it the color. So what is the color that I give my children? Sorry, because I'm raising girls, right? My perspective goes beyond intercourse. My perspective goes to safe relationships. So I told my children that the way God designed men and women, that we're different. That when a woman meets a man, she thinks keeps, she thinks preservation, she thinks this is my own. But when a man meets a woman, he doesn't think deeply about it. He thinks fun. He thinks hanging out. And so that there's always a disconnect between what a man wants and a woman wants. And so I believe that the reason why God said sex should be for marriage was because at the instance, a man has now decided that the woman is for keeps. So why am I telling you this? Value has to precede talking about intercourse. So I tell my children, I say, look, because of that disconnect between men and women, it means that sex outside of marriage will always break a woman's heart. She would always want more than the man is willing to give. She would tolerate things. She would be struggling to earn a lot of things because the man's head is not there. But at the instance of marriage, the man has decided that this is the one. And so I teach my children that really marriage is the end goal. If we're talking about sex, we have to talk about marriage. We're raising children in a world where there are lots of broken marriages. And for instance, they know that their mom doesn't know who her dad is. So that's already another sex education curriculum for us. And so I'm like, you don't want to experience what I've experienced. What happened with me, for example, is typical case study. Woman shows up, thinks it's deep. Man doesn't think it's that deep. They have intercourse, she lives with the consequence, and he walks. And she has to live with the consequence of that one decision. I said, let me shock you. She may have kept me, she may have stayed, but she may have waited her entire life waiting for the day he will come and apologize. Because women can be like that. So I tell them, let me tell you what makes marriage what it is. The reason I'm also doing this because I'm tired of seeing religious, I'm not using this religious in a negative way. People who have honored God marry wrong. And so, like people say, I kept my virginity, I got married, but now this person is cheating on me. So I don't want to raise naive children, right? So I told my
Hmm.
daughters, I said, look, we have to think about what makes us decide that, all right, this is the person I want to have sex with. Even number one, the man has to love and honor God. Number two, the man has to love and honor himself. Number three, before he loves and honors you. I say, man who honors God, he's not going to ask you to have intercourse before marriage. A man who honors himself is not going to ask you to do that because he's going to put you guys through too much. And I don't tell my children that if they have sex, they're going to hell. Nobody's going to hell for having, not in that way, they're not going to hell for having sex. I'm saying that they're going to go through hell. That's the hell of having sex before marriage is on this side of eternity. Is here, they will experience it. And so I lay out the cards bare first. So when I'm talking about sex, it's not triggering. It shows responsibility. It's something God designed for fellowship between two committed people. It's not something to be thrown around carelessly. It's not something to be done with just anybody, especially because of the mismatch between expectations. And so, because I have those kind of Miss Fisayo, you said this earlier. The relationship is the currency for sex education. The relationship. The relationship is the currency. Without relationship, there's no sex education. Now, as I'm sitting down here, there is absolutely nothing in the world my daughters cannot say to me. But let me shake it a little bit. I run a school where I have children from low income families, growing up in communities where all kinds of beliefs exist, all kinds of things exist. And it's not unusual for my random student to knock my door and say, Miss Irene, I want to talk to you. The other one came and said, there's a guy in her compound that keeps telling her, no sex, no love. No sex, no love. And so I have to sit her down and explain how sex is different from love, how sex is spontaneous, but love is long term. You know, it's that because those, so that's the thing. If you're listening to me today, sex education is not you do it and go away. It's a relationship. When perspective want to bend, when they hear new things, they come back and say, Mom, but what about this? What about that? Maybe
Wow.
the like among teenagers, he says, Mommy, the guy said that she really told him on that no girl has that kind of effect on him. Isn't that love? And I said, I promise you, it's not love. He's a man, he needs to fulfill whatever he's feeling. It has nothing to do with, because love is deeper. In fact, I have a boot camp I do every holiday, and this Christmas, the theme of the boot camp is what is love, and it's sex education. So for a 3 to 5 year old, the uncle that buys me candy and he asks me to come into the toilet, that he loves me, is that love?
Wow.
The boy that wrote me a note in class, do you understand? It's the
Yeah.
relationship that determines whether sex education. So those parents that scream and say, if you have sex, I kill you, sex before marriage, you don't realize that there are many building blocks for and against sex in the life of your child. The question is, which one are you laying up for your child? Is there enough relationship for your child to say, but mommy, what if I feel like this for him? Should I still? That's the core. But don't let us just say it's automatic that once you talk about sex, it means it will lead to. No. The relationship you have will determine whether it will lead to. But let me say the one that is even more painful. The parents that are not talking back, they shouldn't, the parents that are not giving sex education should not even come to this table for this conversation, because somebody else is giving their child information. Their child is working on information that person gives them. However, whatever the consequences, parents will participate in that consequence one way or the other. So first, it's better than even talking while you're working to
I,
build relationship. It's better that you're talking while you're working to build relationship. And if you're a parent listening to me and you've not had that relationship, the one way to break it is to tell your children in an age appropriate way about a moment you were vulnerable. One time I told my children how I stayed in a 5 year relationship where the guy used to beat me blue black just because I didn't have the right self-worth. So when my girls are talking to me, they don't think they're talking to a perfect parent. They feel like they're talking to an experienced person that they can trust. And I know that God put us in the lives of our children to be that kind of experienced support for them. So we must not shy away from that responsibility.
so true. Everyone on this platform, this conversation, there's still a few other questions that we need to ask, very important ones. We're appealing to you to give us 10 extra minutes. If you are okay with that, please let us know. You can just give us like a little emoji saying yes, 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 yes. So that we can continue the conversation. We don't want to keep anybody here. We know we're supposed to end in like 3 minutes, but if you're okay with us extending the time by like 10 more minutes so that Mrs. Bangwell can, help us iron out some of these very crucial questions. Okay, I can see lots of yes. All right, so we'll continue. Okay, our next question, we will just take two more questions and then give you the opportunity to shed more light about a few of your the books that you have and the bundles and the program that you're having on for Christmas, which is which I know a lot of us will benefit from. So the first, one of the questions I want to ask is, and parents are also interested in knowing that. So how do I tackle the situation where my child is sexually active as well? And it's all outside of marriage. And you've already told us the importance, which was a epiphany moment for me, where it was like, um a woman is in a relationship, is she's looking at it from a keeper's point of view. And the reason why God says we shouldn't have sex is not because he doesn't want us to have pleasure outside of marriage. It's actually also to prevent the woman from having a heartbreak. um, but what do we do? What kind of support, or how do we have those conversations with our children, especially when they're older, even, or even the younger ones in the younger spectrum? Like when you have late teenagers that they feel, they don't need your permission, or the younger ones.
So now I want you to know something. Wherever there is sex, there are heartbreaks. So that there's already a crack that lets you in. So first and foremost, if you have a child, let's say that in their late teens that are already having sex, the likelihood that that child is hurting somewhere is very high. And I'm going to say it in two ways. For instance, sometimes ignorance, leads our children into relationships. And then when they get into that relationship, a sense of inadequacy leads them into sex. Let me give you an example. So it's trendy for people to ask somebody out. So let me use a girl, for example. A random boy asks her out, and it's a trendy thing to get into it. And she gets into it. Many times when they start and the boy wants to do stuff with her and she says no, he kind of sounds like, well, he's going to go somewhere else. This is how it is. Oh. And chances are that the girl will stay for the fear of rejection. The crack there means that if you have a child that is having sex, they may be struggling with their self worth. That's what led them into sex. That could have been what led them into sex. Or because they've had sex, they're now struggling with self worth. It therefore means that we don't usually need to start with stop having sex. We need to start with feeding their self worth. When you feed their self worth, and I'm going to tell you how, when you feed their self worth, they're going to get to a point where they believe that they're too good for this. Let me give you an example. So you have let's say, I'm going to use the safest age. Let me say you have an 18-year-old. You have an 18-year-old daughter that you think is doing stuff. She's lying about it. She's taking risk. The first thing you can start doing is with, when she comes back, it's important to even make sentences like, sweetheart, you're better than this risk you're taking. There's so much to you than this. That sentence, you're better than this. There's so much to you than this. Compared to, you want to use less yourself. You want to use less yourself pushes the child out. But you're better than this. Looking out for her. Is there something you'd like me to do today for you? Even calling her on a off topic and say, tell me about a time that you felt loved in this home. That one always breaks waterworks. I'm telling you real stuff. You call your child and say, tell me a time you felt loved in this house. They're going to tell you. But that's going to lead to, tell me a time you didn't feel loved. You see, the gap when children don't feel loved in their teenage years is what they use sex to cover. When kids don't feel loved, when teens don't feel loved, they turn to the opposite sex. And they use sex. For girls, they can use sex. For boys, they can use drugs and alcohol. So as for a time they didn't feel loved, it could have been a misconception. But the idea that you're ready to help them see that it was a misconception starts to close the gap that makes sex the window that they are using. I don't know if you get my point, ma'am. They're
Really,
having
I
sex.
totally get what you're
They're
saying.
having sex because there is an emotional empty tank. So when we have conversation, it exposes it. Do you know one day my daughter does it? My first daughter does a lot of art. After that incident where this girl used my phone, by the way, to Google these things, and all these videos came out, and she didn't come to show me. She was afraid of what I would do. She was afraid of my reaction. But a few months down the line, she couldn't use phones at all in the house. She couldn't, right? And so after a while, I didn't realize that it was affecting, the broken trust, right? It
Yeah.
affected a lot of things about me and her. All right. And so we talked this way, talked. Then one day, I don't know what even happened. I just said, tell me a time you felt loved. And this girl gave me the instance. I said, all right, tell me a time you didn't feel loved from home. Hey. So what you were doing to give her the body language to correct, another thought process. I don't want to say Satan, no, before people think I'm religious, took over the entire process that de-emphasized what you were trying to teach and was trying to force her to look in another direction. And so in that moment, I explained. I said, this is why I felt disappointed. But God also used the opportunity to teach me that it's not every human being that can watch porn once and look away. Most humans can't. Adults can't. You can't expect that from a child. So the real deal is you close the window before it is. I don't even understand. Let it not
Totally.
occur. Because once it occurs, it's completely outside of your control how far it will go before you can arrest it. So what am I
You know
saying in
what?
essence? If kids are having sex, there's an empty tank. There's an empty love tank that needs to be filled. And it is counterproductive to isolate, to shame, to label. As you shame and label, you open up, the tank is more empty, they need the person more. In fact, after a while, they need more than one person. They feel validated by the boys wanting their body or wanting, do you understand? So
Yeah.
even for the boys, it can be drugs and alcohol. That's when they feel good about themselves. So the sex and the drinking and the drugs are symptoms. So we deal with it from the root by filling their love tanks, by getting to what thoughts are predominant in their mind about themselves, about their relationship with us, and so on and so forth. Before I end this question, I worked with a child who had a porn addiction. I mean, it's been my best experience so far. The parents were supportive, the parents were praying. This child knew that my parents are fighting on the same side as me, even though they caught me doing something wrong. They, they got books, they live abroad, and they hired me to work with this child. Let me shock you. My first session with this child was the day they knew that the child was suicidal.
Wow.
The predominant thought was, you're such a disappointment to your parents. You've brought them shame. Remove yourself from here. So when kids are doing something wrong, our work is to find the predominant thought that Satan is using to perpetuate. Did you hear what I said? The family was supportive, but they didn't know that that child was suicidal. So we need to be careful, especially in the African context where we go all the way in the name of discipline. We literally carry our children and hand them over to whatever problem they were having by those responses.
Right. Whoa. Oh my goodness, so much. But thank you, and thank you for that. This, the way you've ended the question is as if you knew what my next question was going to be. Anyway, what the parent has asked that what. So you've said there was a child that was had been exposed to porn,
Yes,
and ensuring that if your child hasn't been exposed to porn, trying to make sure that that door isn't open, and that
at
comes
all.
from all the other conversations. But when your child has been exposed to porn, a young child, a young male child, for example, he's been exposed to porn, and not just even porn, between a man and a woman, but same-sex porn. How can a parent support their children to overcome their son to overcome this and challenge? What experience did you learn from the parents that you shed some light to that can be of value to us here?
All right. So many of the things I'm saying here is counseling principles. Take it to the bank. You find that your son is watching gay porn. The first question is you need to ask, how did he find it? How did he find it? So if he stumbled on it and is going back again, you want to know what thoughts are sustaining the wonder. If the atmosphere is tense, you won't get those thoughts. So if he says, well, he was trying to download a movie. I mean, one day I was trying to download a Christian music, and one of the pop-ups was porn. Excuse me. That's when I realized that children stumbling into porn today is normal. And if you're raising children today, there are two fights you need to be ready for. One is mental health, and the second, which is closely connected, is sexual immorality. Those two things you have to brace for it. When your children are going through it, don't fight them. Fight whatever is fueling it. So find, how did this child get here first? If they stumbled on it, if a friend talked about it, you want to know, how did a friend talk about it? So what is it making you consider? In a very honest atmosphere. With my children, I also tell them that on earth, two people are trying to feed you information every single day. So let's imagine who made sure you saw this gay porn today. That person has set up a project on you. Who made sure this happened? I always use John 10:10. I said, the Bible says that the thief cometh not but to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So between God and Satan, who made sure you saw this porn today? Who made sure your friend said it? Made sure you remembered. Made sure it popped up. Made sure there was room enough in the house for you to have access to a laptop and bring it up. Who made that happen? Who is fueling your desires right now? I said, now that person, does he have your best interest? Number one. Number two, I said the second thing that that person that is trying to make you watch this is doing is that person is trying to give you a new identity. What's the new identity? If you're watching gay porn, does that mean that you're gay? No, it doesn't. Satan just wants you to get to a point where you believe that because you're watching it, you are. You are not. Remember when I talked about how people get abused and then something they should be running away from begins to shape their life because another force has interfered with the process. So I remind them that that force is constantly trying to alter your identity. It wants to change who you know yourself to be. And anybody that shapes what you know yourself to be will shape the course of your life, will shape the actions you take in the future. So when you feel like this, you know that you are more than your feelings and you are straight. God designed you to be straight, and this is what God says about you. Now meditate on that long enough. The problem is that we think that this is a small thing. We don't have stay. If your child starts to map in their mind, knowing that someone is trying to make me believe a particular thing about myself, and this person is feeding my appetites in this thing so that I get to the point where I absolutely believe this is who I am, and that person wants to change the course of my life, you'll be fighting on the same side. When you tell them no devices in your room, they will agree with you. And there's another part we don't pay attention to the most. God alters appetite. God alters appetite. That is why you cannot be, you say you're a Christian parent, but it's only when they talk about homosexual you know it. It has to be the fullness of the experience. Because your child can be healed, can be transformed, can come out of it when they have this understanding that a stronger kingdom is sustaining them. And let me tell you, it is not a science, it's not scientific. When we're talking about pornography and masturbation, it's not scientific because I don't know how science people will say, oh, this is normal behavior. The other day, someone with a lot of experience said there should be low entry porn for children. That's how I know that these experiences are not necessarily scientific per se. They are not. Somebody's trying to, so for instance, if Satan is trying to grow gay culture in Africa and wants homosexuality to become the norm in Africa, he wants to use our children. And so, what will be the pathway? So, we must fight with the, and this understanding must not be an understanding only we have as parents. Our children must have the understanding that, oh, somebody's trying to rent space in my head. I'm going to raise the rent. I'm going to start working with God more actively. I'm going to make relationship with God more than just going to church. And by the time they start to cultivate their own relationship with God, God turns it around in a way that even you, the parent, could not believe that it would happen. We've turned this thing
Wow.
to a Sunday service. I want to thank
In
everyone
fact,
for.
wow. Well, in fact, I think the takeaway from this conversation is that, yes, if unfortunately a child is exposed to pornography, it is to ensure that you and the child are on the same side. No attacking the child. It is to find the root of the problem. How did that situation happen? How was the door opened? And, make sure you're on the same side, both with counseling and on the spiritual level as well. Now, our final question before we give you time to talk about your boot camp and other resources that you have is, how can we identify what are the telltale signs of a child that has been sexually abused?
So there's so many signs. One of it is that the child might begin to bed wet out of nowhere. Loss of confidence, timidity, poorer articulation, or aggression. But let me tell you the shocking part. Sometimes there are no symptoms, there are no signs, which is the crazier part. Let me tell you one of the things that makes that one even crazy. Sometimes when a relative does something and the child does not want the family to go in disarray, they mask their pain. But they don't mask it for a very long time because one day they're going to spill it on you, the parent. One day they're going to explode. So, for instance, you were driving one day and your child's reaction on the correction you gave did not match. They're actually crying out that even though I'm masking it, I'm mad at you that you can't notice it. You can't see it. Handwriting change, deteriorating, can be a sign as well. So if you had a happy child when they were younger, and as they're evolving into teenage years, they are now quiet, their temperaments are like opposite. Please, it's not puberty. It's not puberty. If at all, puberty has a tendency to make people more expressive. So it's not puberty. It can be a sign that something has happened. So I have this student in my school when she came in JSS1, their placement test to come in. She scored the highest. But do you know that girl is in SS1 now and she's never done well in school? I started feeling like you failed educator. They brought you this intelligent kid and she's struggling every term. In fact, we promoted her to SS1 based on me writing a note that we're going to give her psychological support and everything. It happened that just around the time that girl wrote that entrance, somebody their mom used to ask to look after them abused her. And guess what? She maxed it. She maxed it for a long time. She became withdrawn. The person was caught doing it to other children, but the person denied doing it to her. And she was okay. And every time you ask her, she said, it wasn't that serious. So, psychologically, trauma, sometimes the brain refuses to remember the scenario. And so, when you ask the child, she can underestimate the impact of what happened. Meanwhile, is is eating her in different places, is driving her in different places. I mean, this is the one child I have met that prefers no parent. You know that kind of thing? And so when a child prefers no parent, let me explain what I mean. If something is bothering you, like when you ask if something is bothering you, would you talk to your mom? No. Would you talk to your dad? No. Okay, if you had to choose, who would you talk to? And so sometimes her dad is coming through as the closer one to her. But when you're talking to her, it's not the same feedback. So I look at her and I see a child who is torn apart, that something happened and not one of you could take action. So more than symptoms, more than checking for symptoms, let's go and have relationships. Let's build relationships so that our children tell us at the first instance, not after people have done stuff for years. What about parents who become irritated that their child allowed something like that happen to them? Those ones are even worse. So for me, there are signs, but sometimes there are no signs immediately. Sometimes the signs you get to know years later, and by the time you're knowing them, relationships are already, you know, estranged already. So, bottom line, have relationships. Honestly, there's no way around this. Go and have a relationship. All right, ma'am. Over to you.
Whoa. Irene, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We can't thank you enough for this free session. I know that to pay for this sort of sessions, to have this kind of sessions, they cost a lot of money. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, and providing this amazing education for us as parents. Please shed some more light. Tell us how we can get in touch with you if we do. Some of us as parents, we do need a little more than what this platform has offered us. So tell us how we can get in touch with you. Tell us about your boot camp that is coming up in December, and various other things you have available.
All right. So first and foremost, I hope am I can you hear me? Okay, yeah. First and foremost, I'm going to say that it's been an honor being here. So I really love the Niger Kids brand and everything that the Niger Kids represent. I love the effort at building the word culture in such a gamified, fun way. So it's been so amazing. And today, I didn't give this session as a free session at all. I gave it as my contribution to building the Niger Kids community. And I hope the parents here go away with it, doing a lot of things and closing the door to the enemy, honestly. So first and foremost, I have a free checklist, all right, that shows age by age sex education for each age. What I'm going to do after this session, I'm just going to post some links. I have a free checklist. That means if you download the checklist, you'll be able to know what kind of conversation you can have for each age group. All right. Number two, I have a set of books. It's called the Body Smart Girl Bundle. It contains 11 resources for girls of different age groups. So the way I've designed my sex education to work is that I believe that all children belong to 5 sex clusters, sex education clusters. And that's 3 to 5 year olds, 6 to 8 year olds, 9 to 11, 12 to 14, 15 to 17. So there's a way sex education should be. So we have a bundle that contains, like, if you bought one box, it has all of the books for parents. And for girls, there's a game card for parents that find it difficult to start talking. So we have a game card. It's a conversation card actually, but like Q&A, the girl asks question. We have a hint card for how the parents should answer so that they can have a conversation. So we have that. It's called the Body Smart Girl Bundle. But then we also have it in age by age pack. That means a parent can buy the 3 to 5 pack or the 6 to 8. You can buy it per age, all right? So we have the Body Smart Girl Bundle. But in December, we have a two-in-one event we're doing. We have the Body Smart Girl Bootcamp starting December 19 to 21 is virtual. That means girls of all ages between 3 and 17 can attend. But the class for the 15 to 17-year-old is going to be on site. So what we're planning to do is we want to get the girls out of the house. So these girls keep coming to our boot camps, and when they come, they send us questions by DM on Zoom, meaning that their parents are around and they can talk freely. And we know that without talk, there's no sex education. So for the first time, for 15 to 17-year-olds, we're going to be having on-site campuses in Lagos, Ibadan, Abeokuta, Akwa Ibom, Port Harcourt. It's still virtual. It's just that we are bringing the kids out of their homes into physical locations where our volunteers will manage, and I'll still teach them from Abuja here. But we just want them in an environment where they can talk. So that's one of the things that is different. So other than that age group, Every other person is learning online. But then we also have a body safety carnival this Christmas where we want girls of different ages to come out. Parents will have workshops, free workshops for parents, and then the girls as well will come and have fun. We want to play body safety games, win exciting prizes, have a beautiful worship event, and end the year. So I'm going to give like links to everything I've said. If you want to learn about, get the free checklist, here is the link. If you want to get the bundle, here is the link. If you want to sign up for the boot camp, here is the link. So I want to thank everyone for your time. Thank you for being here. It's an honor. My love to Auntie Titi for giving me this opportunity. So I'm so honored that I was here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for the freebies and the boot camp. But what of those of us that have boys now? Me, I don't have, so but and my sisters have boys. What of the boys now? Nah.
So
Nothing, nothing, nothing for them.
I have a brother in this work. His name is Ebuka. So if you go on Instagram, his name is Ebuka Boys Coach.
Okay.
God has called him to work with boys, and he's doing remarkable. He's also doing a boot camp. He also does holiday boot camp for boys. All right. So
Okay.
just go on Instagram and search for Ebuka Boys Coach. Every boy
Ebuka
needs
boys.
Ebuka in their life. Ebuka Boys Coach. So the one that God has called me to is girls. So Ebuka is serving boys adequately. So it's an honor.
Awesome.
It's such an honor, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Jide, over to you. Or Titi. I think it was Titi. Yeah. Over to you.
There's nothing to add. It's been wonderful. We apologize for taking more time. I mean, this is the first time that we've ever gone beyond 20 minutes beyond. We've never done it. It just shows how awesome the conversation was. Irene, thank you from the bottom of
Thank
our
you, ma'am.
heart. Please drop
Thank
all the
you.
information
Thank you.
on the channel and we'll share. Thank you,
Thank
everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My mind is blown. My mind is completely blown. I hope your own too is blown like my own. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a wonderful evening.
thank you.
Bye.